Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Very exciting video for you today. We are going to go through basically the entire finishing process, except the polishing, on this crazy aluminum top guitar body. I'm waving it around like an idiot like that so that you can see the cool effect that it has with a change in light angle, which you probably already know from the other videos. So if you haven't checked them out, take a look at the earlier videos in the series. The reason I'm doing this here is there was some confusion about which video would start and end where, and I decided I wanted to pack more stuff into each video for you guys, so I didn't have an intro to this part. So here we are. Get ready. Let's head to the shop and get this done. Well, I already headed to the shop, but yeah, you know what I mean. Alright, so we're getting to work here on preparing this thing for the paint, for the color. You can see it looks really dull. That's all part of the preparation process, and that'll come right back to life. That'll become vibrant again when I go ahead and throw my paint on here. As I said in the intro, you guys are going to witness some hilarity here because I end up painting this thing 3 times, but hey, it's going to be an interesting thing to see, so don't worry. There's not too much to describe on this part. I'm getting the thing sanded nice and flat with 800 grit and then going back in with a foam back disc to just make sure that everything is well sanded, even if there are a couple of tiny low spots, because those will be dealt with later in the process. So, while I've got you here, I'm considering maybe offering some metal pick guards kind of as a product, you know, some custom shapes and stuff. But in particular, some replacement pick guards for your typical Strats, Tellies, and some other similar items that people can use to customize their kits or their inexpensive guitars or really whatever they want. So if you guys don't mind, let me know in the comments below. Would you be interested in something like that? I'm thinking maybe if I do brass, aluminum, some custom wood ones with some burning on them, and some thin kind of light gauge steel stuff so you can get kind of a nice selection depending on what kind of look you're going for, or if you want something crazy like I'm doing here, or if instead you want to go with a steampunk look or something a little bit more country. You know, I'm talking about a variety, so let me know if you don't mind. If that's just a silly idea and everybody wants tortoise shell, then so be it. But if a lot of people are interested in that kind of thing, then I'll do a little bit more work to get something like that set up, and we should be able to open up somewhere for you guys to get that stuff. So here I am adding some color. If you're paying attention here, you'll notice I'm having some trouble with my paint gun. There is an issue with it. If this were going over a straight metallic, I would stop, but because it's going over a patterned surface, and because I have had problems before and kind of know how to fake it, I continue here and I'm able to get a relatively even coat, and you can't really see any issues. If you're spraying a paint like this, like I said, over a perfectly uniform surface, you're not going to be able to get away with that because this type of paint shows every imperfection. So you can still see the pattern through the paint job there, and as I turn it, you can see that it still has that color shifting effect or that light shifting effect. I'm going in now with a darker blue to create my vignette here, a little burst effect. I'm keeping it pretty tight though. This darker blue tends to obscure the look a little bit more. So again, not doing a whole lot on this first pass. I do end up broadening this burst a little bit. If you want to see these two colors in action a little bit better, I did a video a while back where I painted a massive sign, like really gigantic sign for a church. It was a big round one. I think it was about 10 feet in diameter, multi-layered. It had these two colors on it, and then mixed together, actually, I think, somewhere in between these two, as well as some gold work. Anyway, you'll see in a moment how this ends up looking with the blue. I was pretty happy with the color, and pretty happy with how the burst ended up turning out, actually, but there's just something about this. I don't know why. It doesn't usually happen, but I found that the pattern was obscured a little bit, and it would probably come out more and look better with some clear coat on it, but I just wasn't quite happy with how this turned out, so we changed it. Well, that looks pretty cool, but nah,
You know what? I love these colors, but for some reason this is obscuring the metal effect a little bit more than I wanted. Yeah, I'm gonna take this color back and do something a little different, I think. Why not mess with it a little bit? But for now, hey, that's how I would do this burst, and then I'd go in and do the black on the rest and clear coat it. Now you have a general idea of the plan.
So I'll reiterate, there was a little bit of confusion when I was filming this about where one video would start and the next one would end. That was initially going to be the end of the video, which is why it got cut off like that. But let's cram some more content in here, shall we? So you guys can watch me do this again, basically twice. So I go in here and I sand this off, or at least I start sanding it off. I can't use any chemicals or heat to remove this because of what's underneath it at this point. So the only options are abrasion or scraping. So I start off with the sandpaper just to make sure that any high spots are dealt with. I use this to kind of level the whole thing out once again, make sure that I've got a nice smooth surface. And I'm doing it by hand. You know, I don't want to go too crazy on this. I want to make sure I don't burn through anything that's underneath that color. I'm just carefully taking off just the color coat. It does get a little bit tedious though, and I switch to something else here, a razor blade, which you guys will have seen. A razor blade is one of the two kind of most useful, or generally most useful items in my shop. It works quite quickly here. It's just a standard straight razor blade that I'm using as a scraper, and it's going to take off the paint faster and keep things nice and smooth and level. You will have seen me include this in a video recently if you watch my stuff about the two most useful items in my shop. So check that out if you want to see some of the other uses I have for this, but this is definitely one. You don't just scrape wood with it, you can scrape finishes to flatten them out, and you can use it to clean paint off of finishes. So this goes, I'm going to speed up to 300% here like I have a few times. This goes a lot faster than the sanding was. I sometimes will kind of nib off or file down the corners of the razor blade to make sure that they don't leave scratches where their corners are. I haven't in this case. It's not something I do frequently, but it is a good idea in order to be careful depending on what you're using the blade for. For something like this, it does make sense. But what I do here is I just go back in with the sandpaper after I've got most of it off, and I finish it up and make sure that everything is nice and smooth. Which brings us back to the paint booth. At this point, I decide, well, I might as well get the back and sides dealt with. They are, I don't know if I'd call them the easy part, but the easy part to make a decision on at least. They're just going to be black. So I'm going in with my minigun here. This is the same one that I used for the front. Not having any problems with it this time. I fixed it up, got it all cleaned out and everything. This one's pretty easy to clean. This is the Warwick 878 SHE, I think. I've got a 1.2 millimeter nozzle on it, which is why it's a little bit broader, and you got to be very careful when doing your vignettes, your bursts with it if you want to keep them tight. But it's still small enough that I can do a decent burst on a headstock with it, so no complaints there. You can get it in smaller nozzle sizes, of course. There are a lot of options available. If you want to check those out at all, the link in the description to Warwick paint guns is there, and there should be a discount code available. I think it's Brad 10%. It'll be noted in the description. So I get the black all sorted out on the front. This is an acrylic, an auto-wear acrylic that I'm using for the black. So it dries really quick and you spray it on really light, and then you just give it a light sanding before you move on. Really easy stuff to work with, really fast. Particularly when you're working in front of a paint booth that moves a lot of air, this stuff dries super quickly. So you can see I get a pretty tight burst with this too. That's what I wanted with the black, was a very tight burst when I decided to finally do a black burst on it. And then I'm going to go in with a purple afterward. That's going to be a purple transparent, much like the blue I was using, which doesn't end up being my final color, as you know. But hey, the black burst looks pretty cool. That'd be interesting if I just went in and did that with some clear coat. Let's blast through this purple, because it's not going to stick around. Didn't even last all day. Got rid of it almost immediately. I actually ended up spraying a bunch of it and then blending it into the black, and it just obscured the finish too much again because it was so dark. So I pull a 180 here and go to a very light color. This is a very light kind of poison green, a toxic green, and I'm applying it very lightly as well. I want to avoid building it up because I don't like making the same mistake twice, and I certainly don't want to do it 3 times. So this time I'm slowing it down a little bit and just really making sure before I do another full paint job that I like what I'm doing here. I like what I'm getting. So that's why I'm working with the airbrush this time. It's a pretty small airbrush too, but luckily this paint is mixed up pretty thin. So I'm going in just a little bit at a time, highlighting a little bit in some areas, and by highlighting I mean low lighting because you can't highlight with this stuff, but darkening up a few areas more than others to accent the parts of the guitar that I want. And at first I was kind of thinking, you know what, I might try that burst again, but it didn't take me long to decide against that. And instead, you'll see what I have planned here, but I'll spoil it for you. What I end up doing is fading from bottom to top. I do a fade from more of an emerald green, and I start darker. This paint darkens as you layer it, so I start darker and I work my way up to this finish right kind of at the horns, and that's the lightest area and the most transparent. So you can see me coming in here, again, just with the airbrush. You know, this stuff's pretty easy to spray with that. So once again, using the airbrush to feather out this fade. And one great thing about an airbrush, if you're used to working with them, if you know what you're doing, is you can get a really nice even fade with them. Or if you don't know what you're doing, it's borderline impossible because their spray patterns are so small. So you got to be careful. But yeah, I fade from the darker emerald into a lighter emerald and then all the way up into the poison green. And I actually do end up going back in just with a shop towel here and adding a little bit of texture right in the darker area. Because the darker area, just by virtue of it being darker, does obscure that look that we get from the metal just ever so slightly. So I wanted to do something to bring the interest level up there to the same level as the horns, where you can really see right through that stuff. So just a slight texture. You have to actually be looking fairly close to even see it. This airbrush paint, when you spray it this way, dries so quickly that it doesn't really do much when you go in like this. It just kind of makes a very slight effect. So I'm pretty happy with how it turns out, honestly. I go over it once more here with the airbrush. I'm really excited to show you guys how this thing turns out when it's finished. I gave you kind of just a very cursory look at it at the beginning of the video with the finished paint job on it. But I get the feeling it's not quite done at the time of me editing this, but once it's fully completed, you guys are going to love it, I think. Very excited. I'm coming back in with the lighter green here, finishing off the top, the horns, making sure everything is nicely coated, and going over a little bit to fade it back in, right back into that emerald. It doesn't work the same with this stuff as it would if you were fading in a dye. So if you've been watching a bunch of Big D Guitars tutorials, which I highly recommend, they're great, but a bunch of his dyeing tutorials, going back in with this stuff and rubbing it back over the, or not rubbing it, spraying it back over the other part doesn't do the same as rubbing a dye back over. It doesn't lighten it back up. It doesn't remove anything. It will actually only continue to darken it. So you do have to be careful when you're doing that. The next step on here is the clear coat. I'm just using a U-pole for this. This is of course a 2-part catalyzed polyurethane clear coat, automotive clear coat essentially. Something nice and durable and nice and clear, because that's what I'm looking for with this. This is a 2-to-1, so be sure when you're using this stuff, if you're using this stuff, that you're measuring carefully. A lot of them are 4-to-1, so read the data sheet, and for God's sake, please protect yourself. You can see I'm wearing a full face respirator here. I should also be wearing gloves. I'm going to be spraying in front of a pull paint booth, so I'm not as worried, and I don't get any on my hands, so that helps. But you should be wearing gloves. In fact, the best thing to do, of course, is wear, a full Tyvek suit. But I'm spraying a small object in front of a paint booth. If I were spraying a car, that would be a different story, and I would want to be wearing something like that. Or if I were spraying in a very confined space with no airflow, well, you shouldn't be doing that, period. But if you have to, You want the suit, you want the air-fed mask, all of that. This paint is very high in isocyanates compared to normal stuff. Very toxic, hardens quickly, so it will harden in your lungs if you don't protect yourself. It's dangerous. It's a bad time. It's a professional grade product, and you need to be professional about how you protect yourself when you use it. If you are looking to use this kind of paint or any other kind of paint, you should be using a respirator anyway. I do have a link in the description to my Amazon page there. It's obviously not my products, but they're affiliate links, and I do have a full face 3M respirator in there, as well as a half mask. So if you are looking for something like that and you feel like grabbing it through one of my links, it helps me out, and I would appreciate it. I'm going in and I'm putting 2 coats of this on. I think I end up doing 3, but I probably only film 2 of them, because why would you want to watch me do the same thing 3 times in a row? Twice is probably okay. So I do 3 coats of this, I think 10 to 15 minutes apart, because that is the flash off period for this stuff. You want to wait 10 to 15 minutes. If you're waiting half an hour, well, then you basically need to wait 24 hours and sand it again. After the 15 to 20 minute mark, it doesn't adhere to itself chemically anymore. Too many of the solvents will have evaporated, so you have to sand it so that it can bond mechanically again. So yeah, that's that's a little tidbit. Most of you probably already knew that, but you have to observe those recoat windows, otherwise you're going to end up with your paint not sticking to itself properly, and you run the risk of some delamination. And that is about it for this guy. That is the painting process complete. We'll get into the polishing next time, and we'll finish up the neck. And then after that, we can move on to assembly and test this thing out. I've had a few people tell me they think it's going to be a feedback monster. It's going to sound crazy or horrible. Others say it's going to be well shielded because it's got an aluminum top. I guess there's only one way to find out. I know where my bet stands. I think it's going to sound good, except for the fact that I'll be playing it. But anyway, thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. Remember to subscribe so you can see how this turns out. And don't forget to let me know about those pick guards. See you next time.